meaning. So how does this mechanism operate? Okay, well, the mechanism actually has quite a bit that it works with. So the countries are under review, declare what they have done to improve the human rights record. It's all about that. Other countries, of course, participate in the review and they give recommendations. Now, again, it's supposed to be a step-by-step process. Again, we don't skip steps in a process. We have to follow step by step. It is quite meticulous. There's also a part where it deals with stakeholders like non-governmental organization, individuals that provide, for example, information, things of that nature. It is not limited to organization. Academia, experts, subject matter experts are or need to also appear in this aspect too. So there are 3 documentations, and largely this presentation is actually deconstructing, another one of these large documentation, but the UN doesn't necessarily provide things on an easy to read basis. But they often have large documents that are very static and linear, and we have to really produce. But there are three documents really that are needed for the UPR. The first is, of course, the compilation document by the UN, which is the UN takes like from all portions, from all its organs, and it's again highly huge, very like oddly structured, right? Not really easy to follow type of mechanisms, and it places all together in one report to say what patterns they see, what concerns, so everyone is aware of the situation. Second is the nations report. The nations report is produced by the nation in question. In this case, it would be Algeria. Third is the stakeholder submission. Now that is a matter for another video, because that in itself is going to be a very, very long video. In theory, and I repeat, in theory, it's supposed to represent civil society. It's supposed to be the voice of civil society in the mechanism. Let's move on forward. Okay, so this is a map that I created basically. Again, the UN websites are really disorderly and not easy to follow, so it is understandable why people have confusion or not know what it is. So this is really a map to where we were in March and where we are going now. Last March, where we're going to be this March. The UPR process really is supposed to measure 5 years. So every 5 years. It's not something that goes on to the distant past. It is not supposed to anyways. It did in certain proportions here, but it is not supposed to. That's not the point of the mechanism. So the first document here that we talked about, civil society, which is the UPR, again, it is organization, it is academia, it is experts, it is other organs that have, for example, consultation status. And this portion, all the submissions were supposed to be given by this date right here. This isn't over though. I saw a lot of misconception working in the field where a lot of Algerian civil society members thought that this was over. Well, we handed in the document, that's it. No, there's plenty more that goes on. So another portion is, of course, the pre-session. This is not done directly by the UN, but it is done by UPR Info. It is directly in Palais des Nations, and this portion is also done by civil society. It is attended by all diplomats, which are going to make the recommendation. Here it is more the individual that gets cleared, not so much as an organization. You do not need to be an organization even. Actually, I did this deadline probably 3 or 4 hours before it was due, and I did get to speak. So of course, organization helps to be with an organization, but it is not necessary. You can be an academic, and even if the organization makes it through, the speaker has to clear. Another aspect is the nations report. This is where it's supposed to be on August, and as well as the working group recommendation. Now, this is what we talked about in November. This is where all the countries gave in their recommendation. This is the event. We talk about working group members. We're talking about nation. There was 122 for Algeria. This produced a draft report. The draft report, as remember I mentioned, it had 291 recommendations. These recommendations, again, are all voluntary, meaning that Algeria And the UPR is by no means whatsoever obligated to take any recommendation. Then one might ask, well, what has Algeria's pattern been like in the past? This mechanism has been in place since 2008. Keeping that in mind, Algeria is actually pretty well filtered, pretty balanced. They do a 50-50, which means generally they go and they filter through recommendations. Some nations, for example, take all and every recommendation. Algeria does not. Algeria does not have a way of skewing things, actually. They simply take and they filter through things that their population would, that are culturally basically allowable, and that they heed to Algerians. At least in the past, they have done so. Again, we don't know what Algeria has chosen yet, because the adaptation is going to be on March 24th of this year, so coming up this month. So these recommendations here, there was a mistake. Spain's gender equality recommendation was actually mentioned twice, but that was corrected. And so within these recommendations, we're going to break them down. Now, it is a huge document of just writing. It is static, it is linear. You're not going to find any statistics. Anything you do, you have to harvest on your own. This is one of the issues. When during the adaptation, you are going to see some very, very vague statistics, and that are produced by the UN. Now, why do they do this? Because they need general data to see how many recommendations were treaties, how many recommendations were freedom of expression on overall, how many were civil society recommended. So theirs are going to be very different than what I'm going to show you. I take very, very precise. I break down nearly every single recommendation. We as Algerians have particular concerns. We have Article 87, we have arbitrary detention, we have expression in exactly, for example, terms like undermining, terms like defamation. Our analysis is going to be very different, but it is not by any means the all and final analysis. There are many people who would categorize things differently. So that is just the point of view we're going to do here. The second after this, or what this process we're going to go through right now, is right here. And this is really the portion of recommendation and deciphering. So you cannot give a country 291 recommendations and expect them to take them all. That is not democratic, once more. Countries have to filter through them. Who filters to them? Ideally, or the way the mechanism works, this is not my opinion, or the way things are done with Algeria, it is the case that's done all over, is civil society sends the recommendations that it supports, and the Algerian government takes heed to it. So really, it is both. What we're going to see in the 24th, in March, coming up now, is the adaptation recommendation report, where Algeria declares which of the recommendations they will take and they will note. So which are they going to support, which are they going to note? And I will provide a list that I took. Again, separated all of them with the dates, with everything, and chose which ones we should support, or I think we should support, and which ones I think we should note, and which ones we should reject. There's not really ones that you can reject, but some of them were way too political to the point where it doesn't serve our purposes. On a second note, who is responsible for what? So we have this map all over again. Now we don't have the date, but we have who's responsible and who can attend. The UPR stakeholders report has civil society, academia, researchers, and state human rights institution. For example, a national institution in Algeria can make submissions. You also have civil society, you also have academia, and researchers. It does not have to be an organization. Also, you have the pre-session, which we talked about a little bit before. This is actually done by UPR Info. There was a huge misconception in Algerian civil society where they assumed that, oh, the stakeholders over, the UPR is over. No, the pre-session presentation was up to June 5th, where you could still apply. I remember I applied last minute and made it, and then put in a report the last 3 hours. Here, for this pre-session, it is done through UPR info, and is not really by organization. Again, you do not even need to be an organization. You need to be academia or researcher, and also the speaker has to clear. So it's not just organization, like an organization can send through and hey, they're gonna go. No, the speaker has to clear. So when there is the application, you not only put the organization there, but you really have to put the speaker as well that goes through the check. So that's really, really important. And again, you do not need an organization to do it. And then there is, of course, the national report, which is produced by the nation in question, in our case, Algeria. Then you have the state members, which, of course, some civil society can attend, but no civil society gets to speak. Here is the portion where Algerians have an issue, which is for having consultation with the UN. We only have, I believe, 4 or 3 organizations that have ECOSOC status. This puts us at the mercy of international organization and our international agenda. This is why, again, a lot of our advocacy is a little bit skewed, because it depends on what they want to cover, who they want for them to speak. So we are limited very much on that aspect. And oftentimes you will find that we don't either participate in events, and sometimes it is exactly for that reason, because we don't want to be used or fanned, and we don't want our words to be skewed. So that is our biggest issue really at the moment, which is ECOSOC status. And again, I'll do a whole presentation on that. One of the issues, for example, is all of our neighbors have extremely large numbers. For example, Morocco 30, Mauritania 37, at least. You have Mali, you have this, you have Tunis, who has 20, I believe. So all of them surrounding us have huge amounts. And again, unfortunately, things turn into politics really quickly when it comes to the UN, even though they're not supposed to. So we are at a huge disadvantage because of this lack of ECOSOC status. And again, now we have the national report. What this happens is we're supposed to take things down, break things down ourselves, and really send which recommendations we want to Algerian parliament. Again, this is not our method. This is not something new that we're coming up with. This is how the mechanism works. And take heed as far as the ciphering the recommendation. 291 is a lot. And there are some recommendations that the Algerian public would definitely not go through with. They are culturally sensitive, religiously sensitive, or whatever the case may be. So we have to decipher through, we have to give our opinion. Nonetheless, in a few days, we will have the adaptation where we will see what Algerian government has committed to. This is a good thing because it gives our organization, it gives our advocacy organization, and now we no longer have to refer to this, or that. We actually produce spreadsheets of those recommendations and keep records. Okay, so here is a diagram of responsibility. Again, these diagrams do not really exist anywhere. I made them because it is a huge, the UN website is huge and full of information, and it's sometimes really hard to get organized or to see things clearly. So made a visual flowchart for us so we can follow. So the responsibilities here are, for example, here national report and recommendation and the ciphering goes to Algerian government. That's their responsibility. Again, what are the responsibility for the adaptation recommendations? On this portion, you see stakeholders report, you see pre-session. Again, pre-session is not necessarily directly linked with the UN. UPR info provides that, but it is the event that basically all diplomats and so get to see, so that they can actually give recommendations of the ciphering. And all of this is done by Algerian civil society. And you'll also notice that I keep putting in their academia, experts, human rights defenders, and public, because this is not limited to civil society. It's not about having an organization. Academia is more than capable, and in fact, to be honest, I think this is the missing portion. At certain points, we no longer can work with just activists. We need intellectuals. We need academia. So that's the portion.